Is there any stories of the most, aggressive phone call that you got from a coach or an executive after a game?
Tom Coughlin, we missed a hold. Tom wasn't happy and he let me know it. And I even got his assistant emailed me while Tom was ripping me. And he's like, hey, don't take it personally. I hear this a couple times a week.
Joining us today here on NFL Spotlight, he is a rules analyst for Fox Sports, also serves as the head of officiating for the UFL, and he previously served as the NFL's VP of officiating. It is Dean Blandino. Dean, thanks for doing this. How's everything going?
Everything's great, Ari. Thanks for having me. You know, it's hard to believe we're almost through 8 weeks of the regular season, and it's been incredible. What an incredible day yesterday. Unfortunately, I wasn't a part of it because I was at the Bills-Seahawks game, but there was a bunch of other games that were pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it is crazy that we're going into week 9 already. I don't know how that happens every year where we wait for football, it finally gets here, and then in a blink of an eye, we already finished basically half the year. And you mentioned you were in Seattle yesterday for that Seahawks-Bills game. Just out of curiosity, before we start this entire journey for you, how's it been so far this season working with Fox and also especially working with that new crew of Tom Brady in the booth?
It's been great. I've really had a good time and splitting the duties with Mike Pereira, my colleague who I've worked with for a long time. And so one of us is on the road with the A crew and the other would be in the studio. And it's been amazing to work with that crew. And I'd worked with Kevin Burkhardt and Aaron Andrews and Richie Zients and Rich Russo and the entire crew before, but obviously I hadn't worked with Tom Brady. And it's just been a real just learning experience, listening to him just talk football and being in the meetings and just, you know, even at dinner, just talking about stuff like who's the best defensive player you ever played against and it's so cool to just kind of pick his brain. And he's actually a really amazing down to earth person. And it's been a lot of fun.
Probably the one thing I would say about just Tom so far with Fox, like we got to get him a good game. I mean, he's had blowouts after blowouts.
Believe me, we talk about it all the time. I mean, we've had 8 games, 7 of the 8 have been blowouts, and it's been the visiting team blowing out the home team. I mean, we had the Lions beating the Cowboys. We've had, the Seahawks getting beat by Buffalo. We've had New Orleans beating. It's been rough.
Yep, Saints Cowboys week 2, Browns Cowboys week 1. It's been rough, but
Yep.
I'm sure he'll get one here very soon. So let's get started here with you because, like I mentioned before, it's the NFL Spotlight Show. We love spotlighting people around the league who deserve more recognition. I think the average fan probably knows you best from Fox and all the great work you do for them over there, but your entire journey is a very unique one, and I want to talk about it here. Let me just start with this. How did you break into the NFL in the 90s in the first place? Because was it always your goal to be involved with sports? Was football always the goal? How did this start for Dean Blandino?
Very unique. Like you said, I played sports my entire life. I grew up in New York, just outside the city in Long Island, played football, baseball, basketball, hockey, everything, soccer, just love sports, love following sports. And realized that, look, I wasn't going to go beyond high school in terms of playing, but I wanted to be a part of sports and somehow find a career. And, I graduated from Hofstra University in New York, had a communications degree, and I just sent my resume to all of the 4 major sports organizations. They all have offices in New York City. So I sent it to Major League Baseball and the NHL and NFL and NBA. And just through sheer luck, the NFL called and had an opportunity to interview for a couple of internships. And I went in and interviewed in human resources and PR. And one of the interviews was with the head of officiating at the time, Jerry Seaman. I didn't know anything about officiating, obviously playing sports. I've dealt with referees and the rules and things, but didn't know anything about it. And the interview went really well, and they offered me the position in officiating. And that's how I got my foot in the door.
That is pretty cool. And like you said, it's a bit of a unique one. Have you ever thought about, how would this all turn out if it was a different sport and not the NFL? Like if it was baseball and the MLB? Like, have you ever thought about that?
Sure. For me, it was being in the right place at the right time, blessed with that opportunity, blessed with really good people that took an interest in my career, and really was, being at the NFL at that time. My first season, I interned during the 1994 season, and my first full time season was 95. We didn't have instant replay. It had been in from 86 to 91. They voted it out, and so, but we were always kind of preparing as the technology continued to get better. That replay was going to come back at some point, and I just happened to be there for the 1999 season, and got heavily involved in that process, implementing the system, not just from a technical standpoint, but from a rules standpoint, from a process standpoint. And I just, you know, I don't know, had I been with baseball, replay wasn't, didn't go into baseball during that time, or hockey. So yeah, it would have turned out differently. But again, it was just, again, being in the right place at the right time, taking that opportunity, and then running with it.
So, after all that hard work as an intern, you get the job as a full-time guy there at the NFL. And a few years later, you mentioned that you were given that big task of rebooting the instant replay program for the NFL. And obviously, this would turn out to be a massive revolutionary change for the NFL. I guess, how are you approached about doing this, and how much pressure did you feel about taking on that huge task for the league?
We were getting ready. There was, I remember in 95, 96, one of my jobs was I was cataloging plays that would have been changed by instant replay. So maybe it was a catch at the sideline that was ruled complete that we ended up looking at after the fact, and it should have been incomplete. So I was tagging all those plays, and we were creating cut-ups of these plays and just keeping track and sharing that with the competition committee. So we were preparing for that. And then finally, the technology got to the point where it made sense. Because one of the issues with the old system, and I wasn't involved, I was still in junior high and elementary school back in '86, but it was two VCRs. I mean, it
Right.
was two VCRs. You were, and I don't, some my kids don't even, my 9-year old definitely doesn't know what a VCR is, and they were just recording. So if you have to go back and look at an angle, you had to stop record on one VCR, rewind, look at it, and then, oh, there's another angle. Now I have to go to the second VCR. It was so cumbersome. And it wasn't a coach's challenge system. It was the replay official could stop the game. And there were games with 10, 11, 12 stoppages, and the delays were extraordinary. And the technology got to the point where it was all digital. Would record the feed digitally and be able to jump from spot to spot very quickly. And once the technology hit that point, we said, okay, we're ready. We've got to bring replay back. And there really were a couple of watershed plays. Vinny Testaverde, Jets and Seahawks, fourth and goal, ruled a touchdown. Jets win, Seahawks lose. Seahawks don't make the playoffs. And it was clear that he didn't score. And those types of plays really led to, along with the technology, getting to the point where it made a lot of sense. But there was a lot of pressure, but I'd say there's less pressure then than there is today, because we didn't know what we didn't know. We were kind of flying by the seat of our pants. I remember in '99 being in the replay booth going, is this reviewable? I don't know. We're going to look at it. We're going to change it. We're just using more common sense, and there wasn't as much pressure. It was standard definition. If you go back and watch old football footage, standard def, it's like you're looking at it underwater. Now it's high def. It's super slow motion. It's 19 different angles, and the pressure is so much greater today. And really, back then we were just kind of figuring it out, and we were kind of crawling before we could walk, and so forth. But it was fun. It was exciting, and it's just cool to be a part of something that you see is so integral to the game today.
We'll get to some of your other accomplishments here in a second, but would you say rebooting all of this is one of the most rewarding things you did throughout your entire career here in the NFL?
No doubt, no doubt. Being a part of that process was um, really just an incredible opportunity for me. And to see where replay has come has been it's been really cool. And yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest things that I feel like I was a part of throughout the course, because it changed the game, right? It changes how
Hmm.
we watch the game. It changes outcomes. Think of football, or really any sport today, without instant replay, and it would be so much different. So yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I'm really happy to be a part of, and there was a lot of great people that were part of that. But yeah, that's definitely one of the cooler things that I've been involved in.
So you also served as the replay official for two Super Bowls. I was trying to look this up. I know one of them was the first Giants Patriots one. Which one was the other one
So
for
I was
you?
in. So for it was Saints. I'm not Saints. It was in New Orleans, but it was Rams Titans. So the Dyson, the end of the game, when the tackle at the end of the game. So I was actually the replay assistant for that game, and then the replay official for the Giants Ravens, and then worked a couple more seasons in the booth, and then took over the program. So once I took over the program, then I got out of the booth and was just more in a supervisory role.
Got it. But going into like doing Super Bowl stuff, do you go into those games feeling in a way where like, let's hope this is all going to be smooth, nothing too crazy? Or are you hoping for there to be some action where, you know what, I'm going to have to be involved? This is the biggest stage, obviously, for football.
Sure. So you're look, as a rules analyst, I'm hoping for controversy. I'm hoping, because that's when I can come in and talk about it. When I was at the league office, you're not shying away from it, but you want things to go smoothly. You don't. There's always, football's crazy. We say it every year. Something comes up every season that you haven't seen before. It's wild. And so you want the game to go smoothly, but you got to be prepared for anything. And just, if you're prepared and you're ready, and you're in that position, you can make the right call and make sure. I mean, I've been involved in, the David Tyree catch, the Giants and Patriots, Antonio Holmes, and in the corner of the end zone. I mean, there's been so many crazy plays and big plays, and you're ready for those moments and you embrace them. But look, at the end of the day, with officiating, it's a boring game from an officiating perspective is not a bad thing, right? When nobody's talking about the officials, that's the old right. That's the old saying that those are the best officiated games. But you've got to be ready for those big plays, and be prepared.
Let's talk a little bit about your time here as the league's VP of officiating. You took that job in 2013. You took a brief time away from the league before that, came back in 2012, took this position in 2013. That was a year or two after the Fail Mary, which was with the replacement refs. Did you hesitate taking that job just knowing how much criticism there was at the time for officials as a whole?
No, no hesitation. I really feel like, for me, that job chose me. I just, my background, like I said, I was blessed to have a really great opportunity to be a part of the NFL. And it was almost like I learned officiating just from, I was editing videotapes. And back
Yeah.
then, it was tape to tape, right? It wasn't all digital. So I had to watch, if I'm putting together, if the officiating supervisor said, "Hey, Dean, here's 12 plays on pass interference. We want to do a tape." I had to watch those 12 plays while I'm editing the video, and I learned it through that. And then instant replay comes in, and I learn replay, and then I'm involved in the competition committee process. And so I saw the game from a lot of different angles and different lenses, and I really feel like I was ready. I saw the Fail Mary. I saw plays. I mean, I remember 1999 Tampa and St. Louis in the NFC Championship game with the Bert Emanuel play, and the blowback we got from that call, and all the controversy, that happens over the years. So I was felt like I was just very prepared for it. I knew what I was getting into, and really, I was just ready for it, and it was a great opportunity.
Working in that position, like you mentioned, you have to be involved with the competition committee. That's coaches, that's executives, that's presidents. You don't have to say any names, but is there any stories of the most, I guess, aggressive phone call that you got from a coach or an executive after a game?
Oh, sure, sure. And I one of my favorite people in the football universe and just in the universe in general, Tom Coughlin. I mean, Tom, here's a guy that was, had a reputation early on in his coaching career as kind of a disciplinarian, and it was Coughlin time. So if you're on time, you're late. You got to be 5 minutes early, and then kind of changed it a little bit and ended up winning 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. But yeah, I remember they played a game against the Patriots, regular season game. They ended up losing. We missed a hold, during the game. That was pretty impactful to the outcome of the game. And Tom wasn't happy, and he let me know it. And it was a classic rant. And I always look. I've dealt with so many coaches that were upset, and I get it. It's emotional, right? You're everything is riding on these games, and these guys, this is their livelihoods. This is what they've put all their time and effort in to. So I always try to take my emotion out of it and just understand if a coach just wants to vent, okay, I'm going to let him vent, and we'll, there's always a line that a coach could cross, but it was just classic. And I just listened, and I even got his assistant, emailed me while Tom was ripping me. And he's like, hey, don't take it personally. I hear this. I hear this a couple times a week. So it was just one of those. And then Tom comes after he left the Giants. He comes and works with us in the office in the officiating department. And it was so awesome. So yeah, there was that one. Gus Bradley, when he was with Jacksonville, and we still joke about it when I see him, he had a classic one. But I never had a hard time or a bad relationship with any of the coaches that I dealt with, because you get it. Look, there's so much riding on the games. They're emotional. But yeah, those were 2 that stood out for sure.
Would you say just doing anything officiating related is basically just an unrewarding job? I feel like most people would agree that your time in the NFL, everything was very successful, but for the most part, it's like offensive linemen. We only talk about them when they do something bad. We never talk about them when they do something good.
It is. I wouldn't say it's not rewarding, because why would you do it? But I do think when you're in it, especially during the season, you don't have wins and losses in officiating. You just don't. Every team, right? You got a winner and you have a loser. The winners are going to feel good. The losers aren't, and that's going to change over the course of the season. But in officiating, right, you don't. Yeah, you could walk away and say that was a well officiated game, and that's to some extent. But even in a well officiated game, coaches are going to think you missed this, this, and this, and they send in plays. So it was tough in living it to say, hey, yeah, we're doing a great job. What's been rewarding for me was working with the competition committee, right? Changing the game for the players to help with health and safety, those types of things, and dealing with coaches and getting, and when you can have an angry coach or an upset coach call you, and then by the end of the conversation, they're no longer angry, and they kind of see where you're coming from. That's rewarding. And you kind of have that. And also just, I mean, I do feel like we had a good couple of years when I was there. It wasn't perfect. There were definitely plays that I wish I had back. And there were plays that people think, we got wrong, and I get it. But I've heard from enough people post my career at the NFL that, they thought that we did a good job. So that's always rewarding.
I haven't mentioned this yet, but I feel like one, I guess, point of criticism someone would have said about you back then was you were never an on-field game official. Was that challenging to prove yourself, quote unquote, and establish the credentials needed to guide all of those people under you who, of course, are on-field officials?
No doubt. And that's a valid concern. And then I hadn't done it. I hadn't been on the field. And so I got that. And that was always going to be a hurdle for me in terms of getting being in charge of the entire department. I was blessed again. I worked in the office for a long time, and I always felt like, okay, I got to learn the rules inside and out. That's got to be something that can separate me when people look at me, because I don't have the officiating experience. So I was going to become as close to an expert as I could with the rules. I was going to build relationships. I was going to try to learn as much as I can about officiating mechanics and things like that. And I feel like over time, I earned the respect and trust of the officials. And I'm sure there's still people today that that had that issue that I never did it. But I also understood going into that role when I did get the vice president job, I need to surround myself with good people who have been on the field, who can relay the important messages from a mechanic standpoint, that have been there and done that. And so I can still, from a big picture, delegate and look at the game and the department from a big picture, but I need those people that have done it to help. And so I wanted to surround myself with good people who had officiating experience. So yeah, that was definitely a challenge.
You left the league in 2017 and you had a variety of jobs, including your current one as a Fox Sports rules analyst. When you're on air, you look like you've been doing it forever because you're so good at it. And it's not easy, especially when you have to go in and out and get back to the booth. Was the transition as easy as it looks? Like, did you know you'll be this good at it? Like, how did this all evolve for you?
Well, thank you for that. I had experience even going back to college. I had a communications degree. I was working broadcast journalism. I wasn't sure if what I wanted. I said if it's not sports, maybe it's TV, both on camera and behind the camera. So I had a little bit of that background. I've done stand up comedy before in New York when I lived there, and like my early on in my NFL career, like the late '90s into the early 2000s. So I always felt comfortable in front of people, and then I had the experience when I was with the NFL, doing NFL Network hits and being on camera. So it did come naturally. There was definitely a learning curve because you don't have all the time in the world. It's not like you and I can sit here and talk for 30, 40 minutes. You've got to get in and out. You might have 10 seconds to make a point on a rule that is complicated. And so that was a learning curve. And that was something I had to get used to, and learning from Mike Pereira, who had done it and who really was the first person to do it, was really beneficial. So, but now it's like, I feel like I don't even think about the camera. I'm just trying to talk to, if you and I were just talking about a play, and I just try to explain it in the most digestible way, because some of these rules are complicated, and I try to use, you don't want to use as many technical terms. You just want to kind of explain it so people understand it. And yeah, that's been my approach.
Aaron Rodgers, I think, has mentioned that the best officials are leaving to become TV rule analysts. I mean, I think most people would agree the league was really successful with you in it. Is that true? Do you see that as a problem, or is he overthinking this one?
I think there have been, whether it's Pereira, Gene Steratore, Terry McCauley, John Parry, myself, I feel like we were all really good when what we did at the NFL. And yeah, and it's hard when the network job for me made a lot of sense, because I felt like it was going to improve the broadcast. I felt like I was going to make a difference and help people understand the rules. And it also, just from a lifestyle, a different, when you're working in the NFL and officiating, that's, especially in season, I mean, it's 24/7. You're on call, you're dealing with coaches. I loved it, but it's the shelf life, I don't think, is as long as it was maybe in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I just think it's with all the social media and with everything else that's happening today. And so yeah, I think Aaron is it's true to some extent. I do really feel like the league. I don't think the league doesn't care about officiating. Of course they do, right? If there's officiating controversy, that's not necessarily a good thing. But I do think the league just has to continue to pour in resources, get the best people, retain the best people in that, especially in leadership roles, because again, that continuity and that consistency, and dealing with the competition committee, dealing with coaches and GMs and owners, and messaging to the officials is so important.
I think one of the more unique things that you've done, which I'm not sure how many people realize this, but you were hired by the XFL, now the UFL, to be the head of officiating. I mean, how unique of an opportunity is it that you are essentially setting the rules for a new league, which I think the NFL is also keeping a very close eye on for their own sake whenever they want to make their own rule changes?
It was such an incredible experience. And going back when I first started with the XFL, prior to the reboot, right, 2.0, the 2020 season, in working with group that include like Sam Schwartzstein and Oliver Luck and others, and really just getting, hey, here's a blank sheet of paper. Let's reimagine the rules of the game and make it more fan friendly and make it um, more exciting and things like that. And we had that opportunity and being a part of, creating a new type of kickoff that no one had ever seen, and allowing coaches to challenge any play, any aspect of any play, those types of things, some of the timing changes to keep the game moving, was really just an incredible experience. In the NFL, it's different, right? The NFL, you don't have, yeah, there's rules changes, but it's a process, right? You have to go through a long process, and then you have to get, vote membership to vote, and they have to have, 75% have to vote yes. And with the XFL and now the UFL, it's been, okay, we're just spitballing here, and we're gonna see what we come up with. Yeah, vet it out, talk to coaches, talk to people, our stakeholders, but you've got more opportunity to make changes and do different things with the spring leagues than what the NFL has done.
And it's been cool just to see whenever it does come back here after the season, just how the NFL, you mentioned the kickoff rule, like the NFL is looking at them as an example to see if they could use it actually for the NFL. So just speaking of that, I want to ask you a couple of general questions here around the NFL. Number one, the kickoff rule, we're through 8 weeks. What have been your take on how it's worked so far? I mean, it feels like a lot of teams are just kicking it out of the end zone, but overall, what are your thoughts on it?
I think it's been positive. When you look at last year, 21%, just over 21% of all kickoffs returned. That was by far the lowest ever that the NFL has had. And it became a play that just wasn't, it was almost a ceremonial play. And you think about the NFL and just the importance of the word kickoff, right? It's such a integral part of the fabric of the game. And this is a non-play. And obviously, the league had looked at this play. It had a higher rate of injuries. When you talk about head and neck injuries, that's always a concern. And so the league, got together, used the XFL experience, and kind of took that concept and tweaked it. And I think it's been positive. I think you're seeing more returns. We're probably about 32% of all kickoffs returned. We have more explosive returns. We've had, I think, 3 kickoff returns for touchdowns, at least going into week 8, which is a good number. And the injury data, at least initially, is promising, right? The preseason data was good. So if you can end up, if the end of the season, if we're talking between 30 and 35% returns and the injury data is positive, I think the league will consider that a success, and then maybe make some minor tweaks. Maybe the touchback comes out to the 35. There's other things you can do to promote more returns. But I think so far so good. I think it's been positive.
That's the one I wanted to ask you about. Do you think the league looks into making that switch where a touchback goes to 35 to create more returns? Like I would imagine, I think Sean Payton was the one who said it. If that was the rule, we would see way more returns here in the league.
I do. I think the concern going into this season was we don't know what the injury data is going to look like.
Right.
So let's keep it at the 30. We'll get more returns, but look, if you go from 20% to 60% and you have more injuries, right? The injury data is going to skyrocket, and that's not what you want. And you just don't want the players to be, at risk unnecessarily. So I think if we get to where we get to at the end of the year and the injury data is positive, then I think they look at, if you kick it out of the end zone, it's going to come to the 35. Then the number grows in terms of returns, and we know we at least have a 1-year sample to say this play does not present more risk than other plays, right? Other plays from scrimmage and things like that.
There were a couple things here in week 8 that I saw that I wanted to bring up to you here. Number one, in the Tampa Atlanta game, Kyle Pitts thought he had an easy walk-in touchdown. Antoine Winfield had other plans there. He knocks the ball out. Apparently, there was no pylon cam in that game. Is that true? Why is that? What's going on over there for a league like the NFL?
One of those things where, and this goes back even during my time, I remember early 2000s, we looked at that like that. I remember coaches saying we should have cameras on all the boundary lines, right? All the goal lines should be covered, all the sidelines, the end lines, and we still don't have that. And we're still using the networks to provide the cameras, and the networks do a great job, but not every crew has pylon cam. Not every that there's costs associated with that, and I don't know all the intimate details, but yeah, some games just don't have pylon cam, and that was a play where had you had to look down the line, I think, right, I don't think he scored, but you couldn't change it based on the angles that we had. And so yeah, if you can get pylon cam, if you could get every boundary line covered, then I think you avoid those situations. I think the league is looking at that. I think they're working on that to where, in the near future we will have those looks, because sometimes, right, a long play, an explosive play that starts at, snapped at the 40 going in, you're not going to have a camera sitting on the goal line. It's just, that's not, unless it's a pylon camera, that's a static camera. And I think that's something the league will continue to look at.
Kyle Pitts said after the game that since it was National Tight Ends Day, the tight end gods were with him on Sunday. So
the tight end gods were in full effect yesterday. It was wild.
I mean, we had some historic numbers there around the NFL for tight ends, receptions, touchdowns, all of it there on Sunday. The other one that I saw in the weekend that I wanted to ask you about, Thursday night, there was a no call on the Sam Darnold face mask. Does it make sense to eventually make all rules challengeable, face mask, roughing the passer, stuff like that? Or is that not something the NFL would ever consider?
I think they're going to consider. I think the approach has always been with the competition committee, deal in objective fact, right? Let's not get into the subjectivity of holding, right? So we're just taking one person's judgment, the official's judgment, and replacing it with another person's judgment, a replay official. There's so much subjectivity to those types of calls. We saw what happened when they made pass interference reviewable. It didn't work. I don't think it's impossible to get into those subjective calls, but you have to have a consistent standard and you have to stick to that standard. Something like a face mask, though, to me is less subjective, right? If it's simple, you look at that play, and that play's an obvious example. If we look at the video, yeah, he grabbed the mask, he turned the head. Are there going to be plays where maybe they grab the mask and they let go right away? It's a slight brush of the mask. There's still going to be some subjectivity and some judgment involved. But I do think the league is going to look at that. Obviously, that's a big play in the game. It results in a safety. It's a one-score game at the time. So I think they're going to look at that and allowing replay to assist in those situations. They do it now on roughing the passer at contact head neck area or hits at the sideline. So I think they're going to look at adding that for in the offseason. They'll have a pretty good discussion about it.
The one I wanted to ask you about that with that in particular is just the growth of gambling. Like I saw somebody post that Sam Darnold had like 230 passing yards. His over-under was like 245. That affected things. How much does the NFL care about the growth of gambling and making sure that this type of stuff does not happen because of all the conspiracy theories that are out there?
Sure. Look, you can't ignore that. I don't think the league sits there and says we have to have great officiating because of gambling, right? It's the integrity of the game. It's making sure that the game is decided fairly. But you can't ignore the fact. And look, gambling has been around for a long time, and the league always kind of stiff-armed it for a long time. And now we've embraced it, and we're in Vegas and Super Bowls. And you can't watch a game without seeing the betting lines and those types of things. But I do think that the league it has to be a factor as we think about making sure the games are decided fairly and without that type of controversy. And I don't think gambling is the main reason, but I'm sure it's one of the factors as you look at the overall picture of the integrity of the game.
All right, swinging this back to you over here as we wrap it up over here. One general question about your time with the league. What do you remember about the Packers Cowboys playoff game, the Dez Bryant catch, no catch, you and Gene Steratore making that decision? Any good stories about that time?
Yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. Obviously, look, Packers Cowboys, Lambeau. It's a divisional playoff game. Everybody's watching, two iconic franchises, and it's a close game. And you got Aaron Rodgers, Tony Romo going back and forth. And as soon as the ball was in the air, right, it's fourth down, 4th and 2, I think it was. As soon as the ball was in the air, I was like, okay, this is going to be a big play. And then, you see Dez go up, he comes down, and we saw it right away. The ball popped up, and my eyes immediately. I watched the official. Okay, they ruled it a catch. My eyes immediately went to the Packers sideline, and I'm watching Mike McCarthy. And as soon as he threw the flag, I stopped. I remember it like it was yesterday. I stopped in the room and I said, hey, just get ready because the SHIT is about to hit the fan. Because I knew either way, this was going to be controversial. And so we went through our process, and look, I've had a lot of difficult calls that I was a part of. That wasn't one of them based on the rule. And Cowboy fans like to give me a lot of stuff on social media, and that's great. And we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary coming up in January, so just check my Twitter feed because it's going to be electric on that day. But it just was one of those deals where you kind of now, okay, we got to get to work. Here's the rule. He went to the ground. The ball hit the ground. It popped loose. It's incomplete. Me and Gene were lockstep. We were in sync the whole time, and just made the call. And I knew, especially now that the Packers run out the clock and the Cowboys lost. I knew it was going to be controversial, and it just it's taken on a life of its own.
What would you say was a harder task, a 15-minute stand-up or the Dez Bryant catch, no catch?
No, 2-minute stand up is the hardest thing I've ever done. That prepared me. I'd rather be in front of. We used to have competition committee meetings. We used to have league meetings with 32 head coaches and me, and those were much easier than stand up.
I love it. All right. Last thing here, Dean. This is the NFL Spotlight Show. We put a spotlight on people in the league who deserve more recognition. Player, coach, executive, league office, wherever you want. Is there anyone in the NFL who you think should be in this seat in the future?
Actually, two people came to mind while we were chatting. I mentioned one, Sam Schwartzstein. He works for Amazon.
Yes.
Incredible, one of the smartest people that I've ever met. Incredible football mind, former player at Stanford, roommates with Andrew Luck, big part of the XFL in 2020. And we text all the time about rules and different things. So he would be one. The other one would be John Ferrari. John Ferrari's been a great friend of mine, worked with him at the league office. He's the assistant GM for the Eagles and does all the officiating stuff and the game situation stuff. And is probably as in tune with officiating than anyone that I know on the club side. So those are two people that I really respect a lot, and I think would be really cool to talk to.
We'll definitely look into both of them. Sam was also on my initial short list as somebody who, of course, helped out with the new kickoff rule. We had Darren Rizzi, the Saints special teams coordinator, earlier on during training camp. We'll definitely look into both of those guys. Dean, I want to thank you for coming on, spotlighting your career, your journey. It's really impressive. I think fans are definitely going to learn a lot about everything you've done for this game in the past, what you're going to continue to do here in the future. Continued success, and all the best.
Appreciate it, Ari. Thanks for having me.
Special thanks to Dean Blandino for joining us here on the show this week, being our spotlight guest here for this Tuesday. Like I said in the beginning, his journey to where he is right now is a very unique one. Someone who was not a referee on the field, somebody who started off as an intern, not knowing what he wanted to do. And of course, he moved up the ranks and eventually became a very prominent voice around the NFL, and of course, a very prominent voice right now on Fox as well, and with the UFL and a bunch of other projects that Dean Blandino is doing. So special thanks for him to joining us here on the show here this week.